The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, A Beginning to an End by Arossa Adhikary and Lilly. As one of the most prominent countries in the Great War, Russia did not retreat without sacrifices. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk was signed in March of 1918 during World War I. The war was a vigorous brawl that resulted in an estimate of 40 million casualties between military personnel and everyday civilians. Overall, the Russian Empire and its Entente had the most deaths in comparison to the Central Powers and their entourage. The Russian Empire on its own experienced around 1,500,000 civilian deaths, and a whole 1.89% of their population was demolished by this war. During the war, there were three major groups: the Allies of World War I, the Central Powers, and the neutral nations. The Allies of World War I included France, the British Imperial Forces, and the Russian Empire. The Central Powers had the German Empire and Austria-Hungary. Spain, Sweden, and Ireland were examples of the neutral nations. Around this period, many inventions made for entertainment or scientific purposes were turned into killing machines, such as aircrafts and submarines. These seemingly small ideas would form into a part of a bigger aspect, including blood, death, and tragedy that pressured Russia into the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. One of the major reasons for Russia to take the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk into consideration was in late August of 1914 when the Battle of Tannenberg took place. As an eye-opening event for both sides of World War I, this battle caused a catastrophic bloodbath. Two Russian army leaders, General Pavel Rennenkampf and Alexander Samsonov, had an initial plan to make a move into Prussia and northeastern Germany. However, inabilities to communicate properly struck, foreshadowing more losses for Russia if they had remained in World War I. When two German commanders, General Paul von Hindenburg and Erich Ludendorff, were able to detect Russian radio signals, they decoded the words containing crucial information about the Russian troop numbers and their scheduled advancements. Thus, the Germans surrounded and crushed Samsonov's forces and proceeded victoriously around the town of Tannenberg in eastern Prussia. The statistics after the massacre were devastating for the Russians. They had over 600,000 casualties wounded or killed, and over 180,000 taken as prisoners. The Germans suffered 5 times less the casualties the Russians had faced. The Battle of Tannenberg triggered a colossal downfall for Russia, with food shortages and a new wave of economic suffering. Russia began to doubt its choices of staying in the Great War. Moreover, the October Revolution by the Bolsheviks and the Russian Revolution were more prominent acts to make Russia battered. They brought Vladimir Lenin into power and took a toll on Russia at the same time, since they were supply draining and compelled the decisions to make the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk to speed up.
The Russians had not done very well militarily in the war, in terms of what they thought about it themselves at home, but also what some others internationally thought about it. Because from the beginning, they seem to have lost every battle which counted. They had already at the beginning really made life difficult for the Austrians. But every time they seemed to break through the Austrian front, the Germans sent in a regiment, a division.
As the Russian Emperor Nicholas Tsar II foolishly continued driving his forces on the Eastern Front, his country was turning into a mess, with riots on the streets and hundreds of innocent people dying every day due to starvation. When he was finally overthrown on October 1917, the provisional government, or an emergency government, was put into place with the Russian Prime Minister Alexander Kerensky. Unfortunate for him, Kerensky's reign did not last long, as he was overthrown by a communist coup in Petrograd. As the new leaders, Lenin and Foreign Minister Leon Trotsky, were elected, communists in the streets were chanting, "Peace! Bread! Land!" Lenin and Trotsky signed an armistice with the Germans in December of 1917 regarding a brief pause on fighting in result of the time being needed to adjust to the new Russian government. Negotiations for the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk were on the way, as Trotsky had hidden motives of promoting communism throughout Russia to Germany. He continued to stall the German negotiations. In result of the Bolsheviks not leaving the war earlier and failure to acknowledge the facts already given at hand, it cost them greatly once time flew by and 1918 hit them hard. In 1918, they had no other choice but to create a negotiation with the Germans for territory and resources. In result of the non-effective military strategies, loss of supplies, and a merely standing army, they were at ends meet. In February 1918, the Germans had lost patience with the Soviets stalling, thus creating new non-negotiable terms. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk was first signed by the Central Powers with the Ukrainian Republic on February 9, 1918, then was finally established on March 3, 1918 in Brest-Litovsk, or modern-day Belarus.
Lenin persuaded his fellow leaders, because he wasn't a real dictator yet, he listened to others' advice and had a crucial kind of meeting in February 1918, where of the leaders 15 voted, 7 voted for peace with Comrade Lenin, 4 voted for continued war, and 4 abstained.
The Russians were forced to recognize the independence of Ukraine, Finland, and Georgia. They gave Poland and the Baltic provinces, Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia to Germany and Austria-Hungary. Ardahan, Kars, and Batum were also given up, although this time to Turkey. Other than the land, Russia also surrendered half of their railway networks, 25% of their arable land, and a majority of the Russian coal industry. While this may be viewed as a tragedy, the main accomplishment was how Russia had left fighting World War I. The conditions the country were already facing would have worsened, contributing towards the diminishment of their country.
The terms were harsh, and they were harsh because Lenin had nothing. He, as a kind of negotiation chip, he couldn't do anything because the Central Powers had the armies.
On the Central Power side, they experienced a tremendous victory because of the amount of land they had attained and the fighting force they had brought down. Although they had faced many tragedies on the battlefield, they were able to feel superior at the end of the day and triumph forward.
The Central Powers, of course, in March 1918, when the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk is signed, thought that this was great. This was the moment they could win the war. Because guess what? No longer a two-front war, but in some ways now a one-front war.
The Treaty of Versailles was signed at Versailles on June 28, 1919. This treaty brought the Central Powers and the Allies together. The pact was the final peace effort, bringing World War I to a dramatic halt. Without the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, there would have been no treaties with Germany. The continent Russia would not be as large as it is today, and an end to World War I possibly could have never occurred. A weight was taken off the Russians' backs after the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. Within each mistake made, drop of blood shed, a man that sacrificed his life for this effort and result, the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk has made its mark in history worldwide, considering its fatality for the end of World War I and the Central Powers' success. The Central Powers were able to triumph forward through the gateway formed by the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk and conquer all tragedies revolving and leading to the treaty. It has caused thoughtful reflection for countries and scholars worldwide up till today. Tragedy and triumph were the key fabrics into weaving what is now the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk.